Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of S. 3373 as amended, the Sergeant First Class Heath Robinson honoring our promise to address comprehensive toxins, or the PACT Act. When we were debating the House version of the PACT Act 4 months ago, I couldn't have said that. I'm glad that we can today. The bill is not perfect, but expanding health care and benefits for veterans who were exposed to burn pits or other dangerous toxins while serving our country is the right thing to do. I come from a long line of veterans. My grandfather, Marine. My father, Army. My uncle, Marine. I, Marine. My son, Marine. My grandson, Marine. My granddaughter is enlisted this year in the United States Navy. I know exactly how high the stakes are and what this country when we are sent to countries, young men and young women when they serve. I know exactly how high the stakes are when they come home. And I know exactly how often we have failed to meet them with what they need. That's why I helped lead the charge to provide disability benefits to Blue Water Navy Vietnam veterans a few years ago. We were decades late giving those veterans the help they need. My vow then and now was to make sure that other generations of veterans don't have to wait for benefits they earn while they were serving and where their health care is required. DOD estimates that 3.5 million veterans have been exposed to dangerous toxins in Iraq and Afghanistan over the past 20 years. Some of them are already sick and suffering from health effects of that exposure. They need help, and this bill will give it to them. This bill will also make sure that the VA can actually give it to them, unlike the earlier PACT Act could not. I am grateful for the hard work of the Senate Committee and the Veterans Affairs Committee and John Tester and Ranking Member Jerry Moran. They took a flawed House bill and made it better. There were several aspects of their work that make today's vote on the PACT Act very different than the one prior. This is a better bill than the one that the House passed in March. It reflects bipartisan negotiations and input from VA, who is ultimately responsible for putting this into practice. It incorporates the good work of the VA is already doing to address toxic exposure, namely the scientific framework that the VA has been using since last year to expand benefits to toxic exposed veterans. It removes certain provisions from the House bill that VA told us they could not and could not get done. It adds other provisions that would make VA work more transparently to veterans and taxpayers, more flexible and more scientifically sound. All of those things were missing from the prior House version. Most importantly, the earlier version of the bill ignored the massive operation impacts this effort will have on VA's health care and benefit systems. In contrast, this bill addresses this head on. To ensure that the VA has the staff capacity it needs to better serve toxic exposed veterans, this bill would authorize 31 VA medical facility leases, make it easier for Congress to authorize additional VA medical facility leases going forward, something the committee has been trying to do for decades, make it easier for VA to recruit and retain the staff it needs to implement the bill, and give VA resources to process claims faster using modern technology. These changes and additions are critical to the bill's success, and they give me confidence to vote for this bill. Now, without fearing that it would be impossible to implement or risk breaking the VA for veterans everywhere, those who are already receiving benefits. Many of us are concerned about the CBO score for this bill, and the funding mechanism it contains. The total score went from $325 billion over 10 years in the prior version to $681 billion in this version. And I don't criticize my colleagues for being concerned about that. That is an increase of $356 billion. That number gives me a lot of pause. And anyone who's trying to serve these veterans should give them pause too, because not only is it the veterans that will be paying, it's their children and grandchildren as well. But when I consider the strain on the rise in inflation that's already put in place in American families everywhere, however, only about $285 billion of the score is truly new spending. The cost of expanding care and benefits for toxic exposed diseases about $40 billion from the prior, decreases the amount by about $40 billion from the prior version of this bill to this one. The rest of the score is a result of cost of war toxic exposure fund. The fund pays for expanding health care for veterans who experience toxic exposure. That is reasonable. However, the fund is also a budgetary plot by the Democrats to take existing health care costs that have nothing to do with toxic exposure and transfer them from discretionary to mandatory spending. That is causing CBO to score by artificially high because almost $400 billion in costs that are already funded by current law are being scored against the bill. Even worse, this plot would put even more government spending on autopilot and limit our ability to control and oversee it, which is our right under the Constitution. Now, that's wrong. Now, some of my colleagues will vote against the bill because of that, and like I said before, I don't blame them. I'm not. I'm voting for it because as a Republican leader of the VA committee and as a veteran, I know on balance that this is a good bill that will help millions of veterans, service members, survivors, and military families. That is why I will be supporting it today. I've already thanked our Senate colleagues for the work on it, but I also want to thank many members on both sides of the aisle who have introduced various standalone bills that make up the PACT Act, including Chairman Takano, for his hard work and commitment to this issue. I want to thank our staff because they also have worked to make sure that this bill would come about, and not only that it would come about, but it would be able to be implemented. And I want to recognize that many veterans service organizations who have held our feet to the fire every step of the way to get it done. I know they will stay by our sides every day ahead to make sure the VA does it right. I look forward to doing the work with them, and with that, I reserve the balance of my time.